Hi, Wayne and Jen. So we're just going to give it a few minutes for people to join in.
Well, good morning. It's good to see you guys.
Good to see you too. Happy holidays, everyone.
Oh yeah, yeah. The holidays are here.
Yes, yes.
Jen, I
And
love your screen background.
thank you. Thank you. I thought there is something missing, and that's my dog with snow all over him because he loves to snow plow when he's in the snow. And so I was like, I need to adjust this background and put his little snowy face in there somewhere, pop it out. But we have only had a little bit of snow here in Colorado, at least in the Denver area thus far.
Well, people have to stay safe while it's snowing. Can get a bit hairy out there. Um, so we've got a few attendees on, and I think we're going to start, and people will join in. But like with all our webinars, we have more people viewing the recording than actually attending, and life gets busy, so it's difficult for people to schedule this. Oh, there we go. The numbers are increasing now, so I think everyone's coming in from the waiting room. Okay, so we're just gonna give it half a minute more, and then we'll dive into it.
Well, you're in summer there in South Africa, aren't you, Neeraj?
Absolutely, but we've been having derechos here. It's typical for us to get a lot of rain in the summer and nice scorching temperatures, but it's been quite dreary and overcast and lots of rain. So people have been talking about a shift in the pattern. So we'll have to see how that plays out. But on that note, welcome everyone to our final More Tomorrows Live for Liver Health series. That's Learn, Inspire, and Value. And I think fittingly to wrap up the year with our visionaries and our founders, Wayne Eskridge and Jen Jones. And we're just going to have sort of a fireside chat. That's the format of our webinars and talk through the year, looking back. And that's a wrap, looking back at 2025. Huge amount of progress that's been made, lots of implications, applications, etc. And so we're going to not go through everything in detail, but we're just going to give our overall impression and point to trends and patterns and what we see coming up in 2026 as we look back to look forward. Next slide, please. So as always, our disclosure and disclaimer statements. This is not medical advice. This is sharing of information. It's for education purposes. Please do consult with your primary care provider, the specialist, and your care team if you want to follow any path of treatment. So that's our usual disclaimers and disclosures. This webinar has been made possible with kind support from Madrigal, and they've been a huge supporter of the Fatty Liver Foundation, and we appreciate all they do to help echo the patient voice and bring our issues to the fore. Next slide, please. So for this year, the More Tomorrow series, we've had some excellent, very interesting discussions, wonderful participation and questions from our patient community. The first, we kicked off the year with Dr. Naeem Alkhouri on the future of MASH treatments and FDA-approved therapy. And that was much earlier on in the year. And there have been a lot of development since. But we certainly came out of 2024 with a new drug, resmetirom, and that gave a new level of hope for patients experiencing fatty liver disease. So we went through that with Dr. Alkhouri. We then went into understanding alcohol-associated liver disease, where we had Dr. Suthat and Dr. Wainrib, and it was a wonderful discussion. And I think one of the things that came out was following the biomedical psychosocial approach to dealing with liver disease. And I think alcohol-associated liver disease is one of the things that typifies that sort of model and approach. We then went on into framing liver disease for success, and we had Dr. Julie Sweetland, who comes from Frameworks Institute, which talks about how you spin, how you present, how you nuance various issues. And we look specifically about liver disease and how we talk about it. And I think one of the two things I want to drive home there is all of us as patient advocates are advocating for liver disease. And it's the audience that we're dealing with and how we communicate the issues that's very important. And the other issue is the language we use is so important when we have to be tackling stigma. And we know that with alcohol related disease as well as fatty liver disease, there's been a lot of stigma around it. And so that was quite helpful in how we frame the issues. And then just before the liver meeting in Washington, D.C., we had a webinar with Dr. Ken Kuzi talking about SLD in the time of the Ozempic revolution and GLP treatments. And I think that that gave us a good sense of not just dealing with steatotic liver disease, but also understanding in the context of its comorbidities. And that leads us to today's webinar, and that's a wrap looking back at 2025. Next slide, please. So this
I'm
is
not quite sure how to help you with that.
oh. Um, Give us more drugs, AI.
Sorry, that was
um,
my phone.
so this is a slide I've used very often, and I come at this from a public health approach. How do we deal at the population level health, not just the individual? Um, And we talked about the gathering storm, and this is the looming public health threat with the rates of obesity and diabetes and high cholesterol, metabolic syndrome, etc. The costs of inaction as a result of the complications, the number of people leading requiring liver transplant further down the line, the inconsistency in diagnosis and staging of the disease, the lack of availability of an effective treatment for it, our health systems preparedness, etc. And this was, as you can see from the gathering clouds, this was a real downer and a concern for us with all these variables that we had to deal with. And next slide, please. And after this year, well, is it a storm? No more, given that we now are sort of normalizing in many places a multidisciplinary team approach to dealing with this. We have resmetirom out of the starting blocks as a new treatment. We've had a shift in the nomenclature and which has offered new opportunities for awareness, for understanding of the disease, communication, education, etc. We have the GLPs, which are coming hard and heavy on the heels of resmetirom and offering patients more treatment. There's discussions about cocktails, etc. Better management of the comorbidities. And then we also have the non-invasive tests, which are offering opportunities for quicker, easier screening, staging, and diagnosis. But we have ongoing risks. And if we don't change the baseline, these therapies are going to help us and take us so far, but there's a lot more to consider. So with that, next slide, we can go into the discussion. So, Wayne and Jen, it's been quite the year. I mean, I was looking back and I couldn't believe all these changes in the course of a year, and we still got a few weeks to go before the year is completely over. So before we get into the details of all the developments and the progress, what I want to ask you both is, how are you feeling? What is your overall impression of where things are, knowing that you've been involved of this, especially Wayne, involved in this from the start, and Jen coming in afresh in the past year and a half and seeing all these changes, your feelings, gut reactions, and your overall impression?
Well, it has been quite a journey. I feel a bit schizophrenic, I guess. I'm of two minds because um, there's a lot of really great progress. It's amazing. When I first started the foundation, I was I would attend a meeting and I'd be the only patient that cared about liver. And today there's a lot of focus and emphasis, a lot of enthusiasm for the fact that we are finally being able to have treatment. And that's very encouraging. But when I look the other way, the burden on the public, the burden on our patients is increasing. It's not it's not improving. We're still failing on our education, on our um, coping as a society with these problems. So it depends upon which side of my face I look out of as to how I feel at the moment.
And that's a really healthy perspective, right? We have to hold things in balance, and it's about the duality of life, right? The yin and yang of it. So that was a really good overall impression. Jen, how about you?
I like the yin and the yang aspect of this, and I concur with what Wayne said. But I think, some of the things that we really need to understand and is, first of all, I mean, hands down, we have made so many advancements in the past few years in new molecules, new ways of thinking about liver disease, steatotic liver disease, especially. We have started to evolve on the alcohol side with alcohol associated liver disease treatments, both in the cirrhosis stage. And, one of the issues with the non cirrhotic stage is that early interventions aren't there yet, so that we are not actually catching people in these early phases of liver disease for people primarily with alcohol associated liver disease because it is so, I would say it's not as obvious many times as a problem as we can see many times with others. However, type 2 diabetes, obesity, all of these things are also common factors in people who have alcohol addictions or who drink too much alcohol that would actually cause fibrosis. And we don't even know about the genetic side. But speaking about the genetic side, wow, are we making some advancement on the genetic side too, and with gene therapy and some other things. But I would say the other side of it, as Wayne was talking about, to me, the other side is the lack of funding now we have for a lot of these programs. The fact that so many programs have been federally cut and the budgets have been slashed. And so we really need to understand that this is some work that we need to try to figure out. If we don't have funding coming from the government to pursue some of these drugs and therapeutics that we have great potential in, then we're going to have to try to figure out a new economic way of looking things to really fund research here in the United States and in the world. So I would say there's some definitely bright spots, but there are some definite dark spots that we need to understand, and we need to because we can't slow down. The momentum is so great, and we have such opportunity right now.
So I like that. I like the cautious optimism that we have to have, and I like the balanced view that you both talked about. And Jen, I think you raise a really important point. And from the medical or health point of view, we still haven't figured this out, and that is the social and the political context in
Mhm.
which we're all doing our programs. And it's not just liver health; it's every program out there, every
Mhm.
disease issue. And we need to understand what the long-term implications are, what the innovative partnerships and for research, for program implementation, policy, etc., are going to be. I also want to reflect when we started going to the liver meeting, when way back when, and you talked about how you were the only patient many a time. We called you patient zero. At the patient lounge, it was literally like our private meeting room because we were the only sort of patient group around. And at this last liver meeting in Washington, D.C., they felt like there was huge momentum. I mean, we could barely have a meeting because there were so many conversations going around. And what is your overall impression? We talked about the liver movement at large, but of the patient movement and engagement that's been happening. Jen, do you want to? Oh, go ahead, Wayne.
Yeah, well, it has been really gratifying. It's almost a tsunami feeling because it was very lonely, as a patient advocate in the early days. But so as you said, today, there's so many people engaged that it's exciting to see. It's a good sign for the future. So I think that the movement is gaining real strength, and we're going to make tremendous progress. But we're really the wave is just starting to break, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, at the liver meeting this year, and this is going back to our sponsor, Madrigal, right? Because we had our entire Sober Livers advisory group there, and which was just fabulous representation finally for people who have alcohol-associated liver disease. And Madrigal isn't even, the drug isn't even for alcohol-associated liver disease yet. Madrigal, listen to me yet. And but that amazing support, I think if we continue to get industry support for patients to attend meetings like the liver meeting, I think that really does help with advocacy, with getting increased patients' participation and patient participation in all of these programs. For Sober Livers, now that we've been running our community, our Hope community, and our meetings for a year and a half. I've seen just a wonderful uptick as far as people that are interested, they want to get involved, and people finally finding their voices, which is really difficult because of the stigma involved in alcohol-associated liver disease and liver disease in general. But now that we can really hopefully raise some of these voices so that people know that we are patient experts that are coming to the field. And I also think there's a new school of thought that has happened. And over the course, I would say, Wayne, what do you say over the course of the last few years where the patient's voice has really been elevated, not where we want to see it today completely, but we're making great strides as far as really getting innovated and helping and within the clinical trial space and therapeutic space and designing clinical trials. And I think, the Fatty Liver Foundation has been at the pioneering stages of doing a lot of that, especially with, and I'm sure we'll talk about the Harrison, um, the Harrison, yes, thank you.
Fellows, yeah,
The
absolutely.
Harrison
Harrison
Fellowship.
Fellows. Yeah.
Excuse me, it's still early here in Colorado. The Harrison Fellowship.
Absolutely. And it was so interesting with the patient listening session that Madrigal had helped convene and support. Um, it was so impressive at the range of models of patient engagement, from education awareness to community-based screening to advocacy, to access, policy, research and development, clinical trials. And you had patients involved in some way or form in all of these areas. Not only that, there were different types of models of engagement, so we could compare on what's working and those nuances on context and community, etc. So it was really, really impressive. I want to inform all our attendees and participants. Please feel free to add comments in the Q&A or ask questions as well as the chat, and those will all be recorded as part of the webinar. You're welcome to make a comment or also ask a question, and we'll get to those questions. But my next question and the big development has been treatment. And Wayne, I want to start off with you because, I mean, you're not the typical patient. With the level of research you do, with the way you've taken all the research and the information and applied it to your life at a time when there wasn't any treatment, and you've seen phenomenal results in reversing your fibrosis and improving your liver function. So, what are the implications now for the journey of patients with understanding those lifestyle issues in the time of treatment with resmetirom and the GLPs that are coming up?
Well, that's interesting because for those that may not know, I was diagnosed as a cirrhosis patient with a FibroScan of 21 in 2015. And, that is a pretty serious level. And there wasn't anything other than lose some weight. That's about the only, don't drink and lose some weight was the only advice. And well, we took that seriously, and my wife and we controlled this really. I lost 70 pounds over the next year and a half, and I was a typical guy. I'd gained a pound or two a year for 50 years, and it led me to a bad time. But I'm very well compensated at this point, and it's been done entirely through lifestyle. So that's a good message. I mean, you can, for many people, control this entirely with lifestyle. For those who struggle with that, it's a wonderful time now because we are starting to be able to treat it. And that's when Resdifra came along, and it was the first approval for a therapy. And so now we're seeing the GLP-1s come on, and they're weight loss control. So they're foundational therapies, if you will. They're broader, they're more metabolic. But we're also seeing the clinical trials on targeted therapies that they're going to come to market. Things that about in the FGF21s, for example, is a targeted fibrosis therapies. Those are coming along very well in the trials. We're really hopeful. So we don't want to abandon the idea that diet and lifestyle are absolutely critical, but it's really heartening that we have some therapy and we have rapidly advancing science on the treatment side.
We often talk about how patients have to meet the health system. And now, with more tools that we have, the health system can actually meet the patient where they are. And based on the patient's profile, we have so many more offerings, not just saying go lose weight and watch what you eat. But the treatment adds to things. Jenn, it's been an interesting journey alongside riding shotgun with us on this because while it's been so exciting for the fatty liver side of steatotic liver disease, the implications for patients with alcohol are, not apparent or immediately there. And so, in terms of advocacy and how you driving this forward on the treatment side, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, I think it's funny that you say on the fatty liver side and on the alcohol side, because everything starts with a fatty liver, regardless of whether or not it is alcohol or metabolic issues. And most people with alcohol associated liver disease have at least one metabolic issue. So some of these metabolic issues may resolve or may get better with stopping drinking, but that's the case too with changing your lifestyle and changing your eating habits. So if we were to find people actually that were early on with fatty liver, and I was diagnosed with a fatty liver first back in 2013, and I was told, oh, you just need to slow down on your drinking, which is a very similar story to what people hear about their weight. Oh, you just need to go lose weight. And for those of you who have heard that message before, you know how well that may have worked for you. And so my frustration, I guess, has been that if it's working on fibrosis, then it's working on fibrosis. And so it shouldn't really matter if it was primarily what toxin may have created this, or what condition may have created this issue, that the issue is the same once it's in the liver, the fibrosis is the same. But it seems like because maybe, and I'm not quite sure, but I think maybe because it was bias and the stigma against people with alcohol, that this is a harder group of people to do clinical trials with. And I'm not gonna lie to you. I think that sometimes that's true. I think sometimes, but it all depends on your eligibility criteria and who you actually get for those trials. So it just means working a little bit harder in my guesstimation on finding those folks. But it's also hard to find those folks. It's hard to find the people who are in those lower levels, the F2 and F3s, that are from alcohol, because if somebody is maybe diagnosed with a fatty liver, you won't see those people being tracked, say, as you would with people with obesity. And then you also have the issue of people coming forward and saying that it's because of alcohol. If you're obese, it's kind of obvious, okay, you're obese, there's a very good probability that you have fatty liver or steatotic liver disease. If you are addicted to alcohol, though, and you don't share that information with your primary care physician, we're never going to know if you maybe have the steatotic or fatty liver disease unless you have an MRI or have something done, or they're doing elevated liver enzymes and they stop to ask you the question. So they're just harder. I think it's more like needles in a haystack to find those individuals. But as we move into treatments for cirrhosis, which there are a lot of different pharmaceutical companies that are now looking at therapeutics into the cirrhosis area, I think now here's a time that we have a chance to really have a more of a base of people who have both alcohol associated liver disease or metabolic or both, our MetALD, our new category. So I do think that part is frustrating, but I also think it's eye-opening to look at, if we do start diagnosing earlier, maybe there is a way that we can really look at the fibrosis across the board and really try to help people at these earlier on points before they get cirrhosis. So I just think it requires a little bit more investigation, a little bit more work, and a little bit more faith in some of the other drugs that we have out there now for alcohol use disorder.
Jen, your point is so well taken, and I think it's a good critique of the science and medical system, where we always look for single issue causation and then trying to find an intervention for it. And metabolic disease, and especially now with the nomenclature change, and we've often talked about different causations, similar journeys for our patients, right? But it's
Right.
forcing us to think through multifactorial causation and how we address this through common pathways. And so it's not just meeting the patient, but meeting the liver where it's
Mhm.
at, irrespective of the causation. I think that's really important. You mentioned something which leads to my next question, which is finding the patients, right? And all our modeling and data suggests that 1 in 3 Americans are walking around with fat in their liver, right? And if 1 in 3 is right as a ratio, then we're talking about people, tens of millions of people. And yet, when we look at the number of people on treatment or the number of people that are diagnosed, our numbers are still very, very low, right? And so from a patient perspective, what do you see, both of you, from the point of view of how do we find these patients? What do we need to do to change the way things are being done in order to find these patients? Because business as usual isn't going to cut it, right?
The statistics are really staggering when you say it. 1 in 3, that's cool, but that's over 100 million people.
Right.
So, I mean, it's really the numbers are astonishing, and in reality, most of those people are not going to get directly ill from the liver, but we do know that increasing fat in the liver, even if it doesn't lead to MASH or fibrosis, is a cause of all-cause mortality. You know, there's the relationship to your health of that burden is real. So the the education, I think, for people to appreciate that is important, but also the medical community kind of dismisses those early things. You know, we are not very good at the wellness thing. We'll change the oil in our car to prevent it from ruining the engine, but we won't do a darn thing about our metabolism until the thing starts to break. So uh, the whole view of how you approach health, I think, from both a societal and a medical profession really needs to be more adult, if you will.
Yeah, I
Uh,
always get, oh, I'm
Go ahead,
sorry.
Jen. Yeah.
I always get the question, and normally because I talk a lot to my Uber and Lyft drivers when I'm driving around about what I do for a living, and I get this question from a lot, not just the Uber and Lyft drivers, but how much alcohol? How much alcohol is it that I can drink without getting, sick? And I think about it, and I'm like, well, and I normally say it's a crapshoot. I said, because there are so many factors that are involved with developing liver disease. And I said, however, I said, as you are putting toxins into your system, whether it's alcohol, whether it's processed foods, whether it's too much Tylenol with drinking alcohol or other types of drug-induced liver injury, your liver will become sluggish. And it takes longer and longer and longer for that liver to regenerate. And I think we have done ourselves a huge disservice of talking about liver regeneration, just like, oh, it's like a snap of a finger. Oh, I stopped drinking and my liver will regenerate. Well, how long have you been doing damage to that liver? And that's going to be how long it's going to take you for that liver to regenerate, right? So this sluggish liver, as Wayne talked about, may not cause severe fibrosis, may not cause cirrhosis, but will internally cause some other issues in your system. And looking at this whole body health, I think, is the way that we really need to start looking at this field, because even if you're not going to develop liver disease, if you fix that fibrosis that may have developed into a healthy liver, you're going to be more healthy entirely. It is that engine that you're talking about, that Wayne was talking about. It is that engine that you need to be treating very well and changing the oil and doing all those things for.
This is music to my ears as a public health physician, right? Because in public health, we always talk about prevention. And in medicine, what we're dealing with is once disease has set in or there's pathology, how do we try to reverse that, cure that, or manage that, as opposed to preventing the onset of the disease? So there's that prevention, but there's also prevention on preventing disease from progressing or reversing disease, if we get it at the early stages. And this is all what we're talking about in finding these 1 in 3 people walking around with disease, which comes to the next question, which was also been quite a technological shift, which is the non-invasive tests that we've been talking about, and the wide range of tests, from biopsy, which we started with, to imaging, and they're now looking at other biomarkers. Wayne, you're probably the most tested person I know when it comes to liver disease. Well, it's actually quite enjoyable accompanying Wayne through the exhibition halls and trying all the devices and testing methods. So, what are your thoughts now and impressions of the NITs? How do we get the maximum benefit of it, especially when we're talking about finding all these millions of people?
Well, it's an exciting time on the NIT front because the science has evolved to where we have useful tools. They're not perfect by any means, but they really are quite good. They're typically based on measurement of liver stiffness, but we also have blood tests that are very competitive with it. Um, and the challenge is not, do we now have some tools? It's that we are not deploying them well. The availability of the screening tools is not well distributed. You know, we know how to use them now, but they're still largely in the hands of specialists. And we need to be moving that technology out into the primary care and actually do screening. Just an anecdote, one of the first things that we did with the foundation was do a study of people that didn't know, had never been tested and didn't know that they had any liver disease. And we found that 15% of them did. Now that's astonishing. They had no idea. And that's probably still a pretty good statistic. And that's happening at the primary care level. So our biggest challenge now, we'll continue to perfect the technology, but it's good enough now to deploy. And it's how do we find ways to actually get it into the protocols of the early, the primary care and the first level medical community.
Absolutely. Jen, do you want to respond to that as well?
Yeah, I mean, like the FIB4 is basically all you need is a liver enzyme test to determine and a CBC for your platelets to determine what your FIB4 is. And what the FIB4 is not the best test in the world, but it will hopefully screen positive on those people who have severe fibrosis. And at least we're catching some of those folks in that fold. It may have false positive where people have where people may not have fibrosis, but at least if they go for their testing, whether it may be the ELF test, which is more proprietary as far as a blood test goes and may or may not be covered by insurance, or a FibroScan, being rolled out is a lot better than not knowing at all, right? And so I think at the very least, we do have some better tools than just looking at the AST, ALT, and determining if someone is or is not at risk. And we have many smaller many smaller practices that aren't even doing liver enzyme tests annually and aren't even evaluating things unless they think that someone is at risk. And even if they are at risk and they're obese, they still, are only getting their liver enzymes tested maybe once a year. So I do think that there is improvements, but I will tell you, having the FibroScan, if we could get the FibroScan into the PCP's hands and they would use them, which I know the PCPs are already very, very busy, but we have proven that the liver is a very important organ, as I just mentioned earlier. And the earlier we find problems with the liver, the earlier we can help with those problems with the heart that they're checking for every single time, and the kidney that they're checking for every single time, and the lungs that they're checking for every single time. We know this organ is responsible for how everything else works. So I do think it's important, and then I do think the other issue though that we have though with the FibroScans and with the MRIs is actually having enough places where these are available and having them to be less expensive, especially if you're looking at like the MREs, and less expensive and more insurance companies covering them. So don't get me started on the insurance companies.
And this is where our work is not done, and it's not just the patient community, but the critical alliance that we have to form with the healthcare providers in order to get this remunerated. But it does sound, and in the hopes of not reinventing the wheel, it does sound like movements we've created previously on other medical issues. I mean, you take something like breast cancer, right? A mammogram has become routine standard that women go for. All the imaging centers are doing it now, etc. but it was a Herculean effort in order to raise public awareness together with provider awareness, and sort of the two met, and that's how we had this sort of wave of awareness happening. Um, and it's almost campaign style that it needs to happen. It's not just, well, put the protocol in place, but it's public education. It's having people ask for this with their doctors, etc. So now that we've got so many more tools and we have something to do about it in terms of treatment, a more holistic biopsychosocial approach, etc., where do you see this going now on how we take this to another level? And this starts coming to what your wish for 2026 will be.
Well, I'm reminded of I think it's a song from My Fair Lady, but I think of it as, why can't a liver be more like a breast? There's no appeal at all to a liver. You know, it's really the Rodney Dangerfield. We care about our hearts. We do care about our kidneys. We care about our bowels tremendously, and we don't ever think about the liver. So it's a lot of awareness, and just somehow getting people to appreciate how important the liver is, and it's its own worst enemy. It's such a robust organ. It is so powerful, and it's a marvel. It's an absolute marvel. And because it's so good, we tend to just ignore it
Yeah.
until it really gets beat up.
Yeah. Yeah, I always say that because for those of you who don't know, I have not had a liver transplant. When I was diagnosed in 2018 with severe alcohol-associated hepatitis and decompensated liver, thankfully, and by the grace of God, my liver recompensated, and I'm living almost like Wayne now. Although I think I have a little more problems with my liver, but I do think one of the things that I would say, and I would agree. I think he was saying Rodney Dangerfield, it gets no respect, and I would say that that's for the younger generation. They're not going to know what that means here pretty soon. But I do think one of the things that especially on well, alcohol, not just on the alcohol side, but on the obesity side, when we're looking at metabolic functions, and we look at the younger people that are now actually developing liver disease, and we look at just the amount or the different profile now that we have of a person who is walking around with liver disease. And I think that has changed a lot. Has really changed the landscape. I think the liver, maybe, and I'll go back to stigma, for a very long time was maybe just thought of as being a brown bottle disease, maybe, or something like that. Where now we know, with genes and understanding genetic testing, that roughly about 40% of this is driven by genetics, including alcohol use disorder and addiction disorders as well, including food, but including people developing cirrhosis more quickly. And as we go from generation to generation, I think that this is just increasing and increasing as we move, because we have more and more people who are being diagnosed with liver disease. So I do think we're at, you had talked about the storm, and is the storm over? I think the storm is changing in its landscape a little bit, and we are finding ways of tracking the storm better, but we haven't totally improved on these tracking capabilities. And we haven't really figured out how to dissipate it completely. I think we've been able to go in and kill a few of these little tornadoes that are in there and helping some people, but we've got to get number one, we've got to get doctors diagnose or doctors prescribing what we have that's out there. We have to realize that now we have the GLP-1s that we're realizing work across addictions, right? And not just for the food, it's also working for the alcohol. And we're figuring out that these molecules have a greater breadth than they did before. So I do think we're on a leading cutting edge here, and I'm excited to see what comes next. But I do think the storm is still overhead, and we cannot take our eye off of it. And I think it's an important thing for us to still continue to really be good meteorologists about.
I love the analogy. So I think there's an element of tackling stigma or dismantling stigma on populations that are at risk or have the disease. But there's also an element of, as Wayne was talking about, destigmatizing the liver itself. And they kind
Yes.
of go hand in hand, the patient profile, which is changing. And we also realizing it's not all your fault.
Yeah.
Right? And raising awareness about the liver because it's a wonderful organ, and I think we should ban the use of chopped liver, right? The stigma around that. So I do want to address some of the questions that have come up, and one is related to uh, testing and sometimes when conflicting results come about, or when, as we've seen, a high degree of variance between different types of tests, or even the same test taken at different times, and how we deal with that. And I just want to quickly respond that the medical community and the liver community has been working hard on getting a good protocol in place. That if you have two conflicting results, how you get a tiebreaker result, etc. And also the sequence by which you start off with a broadly sensitive test and then move to a specific test. And a sensitive test is going to tell you and pick up with a low threshold on that something might be wrong, but a specific test will tell you more accurate staging, etc. I wanna put some questions to you that came on online when people were registering for the webinar. Um, so, when from your experience, in reversing disease without treatment, and going back to a wonderful saying from Hippocrates, which is food is the best medicine. So we have treatment, but yet there's so much talk about supplements, the types of diet one needs to take, additives, etc., that could affect blood results or improve results, etc. Now, this is a whole other realm. I don't know if it's complementary or alternate or supplements. How should patients in the liver space navigate all of this?
Well, first of all, you have to realize there is no magic bullet. There's no liver cleanse. There's nothing in the short term that is going to solve the problem. But the way to think about it is that the liver does 500 jobs, something more than 500 things. It's enormously complex, and it uses as its resources all of the food that you eat. And what you want to do with your liver is to have it work as little as possible. And that means that all of those multiple chemical processes, you don't want to overload any of them. In an ideal world, if your liver's getting the nutrients that it needs, but it's not having to cope in any way with an oversupply of any of them, it's going to be able to recover or be healthier. So that means, the sugar binges that we go through are just a case in point. Your liver has to suddenly respond to this flood of a thing that's in itself not harmful. I mean, it's a power source, But when you have too much of it, then it's a problem. Alcohol, is the same kind of thing. Fat, there's a whole bunch of different kinds of fat, and they all are processed in different chemical pathways. So in actual diet, a mixture of fats is healthier than concentrating on just one. So it's those kind of ways to think about the food is don't be so concentrated on a particular set because unless it's just vegetables, that's probably not going to be good for you.
Everything in moderation, right? Even good stuff.
That's right.
Jen, do
Especially,
you add to anything on that?
Well, and I mean, food is a science, as Wayne has been able to show us through his blogs and everything, talking about the different oils and how they work in your system. I find it extremely fascinating because I'm not a food scientist, but I have found, and what has kind of fascinated me, and if anybody who is out there that has alcohol use disorder or is in remission from alcohol use disorder knows that your first go-to after you stop drinking is sugar. And that's because that is what you are craving, because that is the addiction, really. The addiction is really to that sugar. And but I always said that my hardest thing was giving up the salt, which we all know is another big portion of this. But I do think understanding, and this goes across the board for any steatotic liver disease, is understanding that food component and understanding the moderation component and understanding what really fuels your liver and what is good for your liver to really help it do its job, I think is a very important education piece that we have missing. And I think across the board, the more that we can educate people on how to find that food, because culturally, we always talk about the Mediterranean diet, and I know I'm going a little off course here with this, but it gets really frustrating for people in different cultures to hear that Mediterranean diet. It's almost as bad as hearing lose weight. It's like, how, if you are from the Hispanic community, how do you go home and make a Mediterranean diet for your family when you may have your grandmother living there and your children? And and you want to eat culturally specific food. And so we need to be teaching that, not just throwing somebody into just a say, oh, just eat this. And Mediterranean diet is not cheap either. It's expensive to eat a Mediterranean diet. So how can you eat something on a budget? That's another thing that we need to work on. So I think at Fatty Liver Foundation, we're doing a lot of this with the Wellness League, with providing resources on how to find healthy foods. And we're really trying to help people find diets that meet their needs. And so I think that's one of the things that I really like about the Fatty Liver Foundation and being part of this organization is we are looking at wellness across the board.
Excellent. And Jen, you took the words out of my mouth because this is a lot for patients to navigate, right? The different types
Uh,
of diet, supplements, treatments,
uh,
non-invasive tests, diagnosis, et cetera, lifestyle modifiers. So all this information is presented really succinctly and laid out well on our Wellness League. And Tiffany Mensah on our team has been the one coordinating all of this. She's also very responsive if you have any questions and want help navigating it. So it's all available on our website, and we present a lot of the studies and data behind a lot of these thoughts on what to do. So it's an important resource for all of you to look at. So this is a question that came up also in from our participants, and I do like it. I know it's complex and everything, but there's something about the reductionism of this question, which I think is interesting in this day and age where we are in the liver movement. So if you were sitting in your Uber or cab and you told someone about fatty liver disease, their first question could possibly be, is there a cure for fatty liver disease? And so given all the tools we have now, how would you respond to this?
You really can't cure metabolism. It's just fun. It's a matter of balancing the metabolism in a healthy way. So I think you have to think about it as a system. It's not, it's not, can I actually take a pill and fix it like an antibiotic? Because, you can change the way your liver behaves, but you can't uh, stop it, actually.
Yeah, I think that management would be the better word for it, even with advancements in medicine, even if they find a so-called reversal, which they have, they're working on the reversal of cirrhosis, just meaning that they're able to reverse that scar tissue, the dead scar tissue that has developed because of the cirrhosis. Even if you reverse it, if you don't manage your liver in the way that you eat and the way that you hopefully don't drink alcohol, that you exercise, the things that you still need to do to contribute to the metabolism, then you are still going to put yourself at risk. I mean, people who have received liver transplant is not a cure. Liver transplant gives you a new liver to ruin if you don't abide by certain managements of and your body naturally may be predisposed, as we talked about. We can't fix the genetics, but we can fix the management. Maybe eventually we can look into gene therapy down the road. I don't want to say never to anything because there's always possibilities. But where we are right now in science, this is really a management of the disease. We may get better at treatments. We may have treatments that do more. But at the end of the day, we're always going to be at management.
That was beautifully answered. And the liver being a spectacular organ that it is, it's how do we create those enabling conditions with the diet, the lifestyle, etc., and the treatments that we have to allow that liver to bounce back, so to speak, in some way.
And
So
don't feel bad because the heart is the same way, right? I mean, yeah, so it's not like the liver is unique in this aspect, right? The heart is still the same way. We still have to manage our cholesterol, manage our, it's all about, management of our overall health. And I want to make sure that's clear. So don't get distraught about your liver. It's just like any other organ.
and it bounces back better than most other organs. The liver's amazing like that. So we got 2 minutes left, and I pulled together four scenarios of where we are and where we could go in the liver movement, and then I'm going to ask you for your wish for 2026 when it comes to our liver movement. So the four scenarios are same old with a different name, a new day, early days, and then a paradigm shift in liver disease. Okay. Let me say that again. Same old with a different name, a new day, early days, and then a paradigm shift in liver disease.
Go ahead, Jen.
Well, I most definitely I well, I think it's a little of both, to be honest with you, because the same old with a different name. This is at the end of the day liver disease, and it is the same liver disease, right? But we're calling it something different because we understand it better. We understand how it is working better. But truly, going back to my fibrosis comment, it really is a matter of where you are in your fibrosis and what behavior or what cause got you there. They can be treated separately, and as we're finding out now, they can also be treated together with some of these new medications that are coming out, like the GLP-1s, for example, to lose weight or maybe stopping drinking. A new day. I absolutely think it's a new day too, because we have all these new treatments and everything that's coming forward is so exciting. Because I mean, if you were at the liver meeting, it was people are like, wow, look at this. What's ahead, right? Definitely too a paradigm shift in the understanding of metabolic diseases, because I'll go back to what we're finding in science. And yes, it is still the early days because we have a long, long way to go. So I think that was a loaded question, Neeraj.
Wow, she took them all. You saw that, didn't you? Took them all.
I should put all of the above as well,
A really
right?
bad decision maker. I don't know what my case may be.
But for me, I think we're at a paradigm shift. We are at the point where we're going to have effective treatment of fibrosis. When the trials on the current cirrhosis, the advanced disease drugs come out, we're going to have some successes. That's going to be a paradigm shift because right now we don't have any treatment for a stage 4. And that's the one that kills you for sure if you let it go too far. And so I think that we're on the verge of a paradigm shift. And all the rest of Jenn's comments I thought were fantastic.
Excellent. So I want to refer to a question that was asked, and I think it's also a lovely wish that we could have. And then you have like 20 seconds to give your wish. Uh, and the question was, do you see an opportunity to label food as liver healthy like we do for heart healthy food? And that's actually a really nice wish that we could have to think about in 2026. But over to the two of you for your wishes for next year.
I wish we could find funding that would address the problem in an effective way.
Yeah. Yeah, finding funding. I agree. That's a big one. I'll give a wish for sober livers is because we are just beginning. And I will say we are only accessible as the people who know about us. And there are so many people out there from so many different communities, underserved communities, and other communities that need to know about sober livers and that we're there to support people because no one should feel alone walking this journey together, no matter the cause of your liver disease. No one should be navigating this alone because, as we talked about, there are so many complexities associated with it. So I want to thank the Fatty Liver Foundation for having sober livers. It's been the best Christmas presents for me for the past 3 years is having y'all around. So I appreciate that, and I appreciate our community, our advisors, and our whole health advisory council. So thank you to everybody.
Thank you, Wayne and Jen. Your leadership on this issue has been phenomenal. You guys have been inspiring both for health providers, for the biotech industry, and hugely for the patient community. And I think just at this time of the year, just taking stock and being appreciative of the two of you and our patient community for their engagement through the course of this year with all the activities we do. So it's been a wonderful, wonderful year. This webinar will be recorded and shared on our YouTube channel. And I'm sorry that I couldn't get through all the questions, but please feel free to get in touch with us and we'll respond as best we can. Keep engaged, keep safe, eat healthy, and have a wonderful break this holiday. And we'll see you fresh in 2026. Thank you all so much. And thank you to Madrigal for supporting this webinar series.
Thank you.
Take
Happy New
care,
Year.
everyone.
Bye bye.
Bye.